The next salvo in the battle of the super sedans has been fired. That is the new C63, and it's better in all the areas that count. Compared to the old one, it's got more power, more torque. It's also more fuel efficient. And even though it squares up against the technologically advanced and mighty BMW M3, there is some old school thinking with that car. But before we get into all of that, a public service announcement. This model is no longer called the Mercedes-Benz C63 AMG. It is officially the Mercedes-AMG C63. That's because the company wants to align it closely to the recently released Mercedes-AMG GT sports car, which in turn gets its name because the company wants to align it closely to its F1 operation, Mercedes-AMG. Now that that's lined up, let's have a look at this beast. The most obvious bit is the completely redesigned front end that's been redone to accommodate the wider track and the bigger engine. There are some other details like the aerodynamic pieces that help the car perform at its best, but unfortunately, pictures just don't seem to do this car justice. You can't really appreciate the aggression and the attitude that it has until you see it in the metal. There are side sills and a rear apron and quad exhaust tailpipes to complete the picture, and while it is a very nice looking machine, it somehow just doesn't have that thing that the M3 does. The ability to look like a completely cohesive design, rather than a car that's been beefed up by some extra plastic bits. Not that the C63's design is purely cosmetic, because there are lots of functional reasons for the extras that it has. But it's almost like the difference between a bulked up bodybuilder and a finely toned athlete. You can see which one is stronger, but you have a pretty good idea of which one is faster. We'll find out how fast in a little while when we unleash it on Zwartkops Raceway, but for now, the C63 and I are in the getting to know you phase, so it's a little too soon to get all hot and sweaty on a racetrack. And besides, Mercedes-Benz are going to great pains to point out the fact that you can actually use this car as an everyday transport option or as a long-distance cruiser, despite its monumental power and its supercar rivaling 0 to 100 time. It has a comfort-biased drive mode that softens the suspension and relaxes the shifts of the 7-speed dual-clutch gearbox. It has a sailing mode that actually decouples the engine under certain circumstances in order to save fuel. And while I'm sure there are circumstances under which those things are useful, and there are people who will appreciate them, there's just one problem. Well, more than one actually, and they're not so much problems as they are enablers for misbehaving. The first and the most obvious one is the noise. Our test car is fitted with the performance exhaust option, and depending on what driving mode you're in, it's either really fantastic or utterly spine-tingling. And the other thing is this car's general demeanor. It just doesn't feel like it wants to be a daily commuter, and that's despite this interior. It's not a carbon fiber clad stripped out cockpit, it's just a well-specced and luxurious setup that you might expect to find in any C-Class. The mix of materials, the design and the tech completely overshadow the performance pieces, which in our test car amount to a squared off steering wheel and some bucket seats. I said earlier that Mercedes-Benz used a bit of old school thinking in this car, and they've used it probably where it matters the most. While most companies are relying on smaller engines with turbochargers for their performance, Mercedes-Benz have tried something different. They haven't shunned the turbos, in fact they've fitted 2 of them, but they've fitted them right in the middle of a stonking V8 that in the lesser version of the C63 still puts out 350 kilowatts and 650 Newton meters. In our 63S test car, that's up to 375 kilowatts and 700 Newton meters for a 4-second 0 to 100 time, an acceleration that would easily shatter its 250 km/h limited top speed. The entire package makes flooring it in this car an exceptionally enjoyable pastime. But you don't need a racetrack to realize this car is properly quick. Even on Zwartkops' relatively short back straight, you get into some serious speed. I was going to say this car is understated, but it's more like effortless. It accelerates and it corners and it brakes with such ease that it just continuously builds your confidence. Braking is helped by the optional carbon ceramic discs on our test car. 85,000 Rand buys you impressive fade-free stopping power. Equally impressive is the cornering ability of the C63S. It lacks a little in pure feedback terms, but it delivers tons of grip without drama. The S features an electronic rear diff as standard, reacting more quickly than the regular C63's mechanical diff, and at the same time allows you to keep your foot in it without the fear of being spat off the tar. The grip is phenomenal, very often outstripping what you think is possible at the kinds of speeds you can get up to in this car. For a car with as much power and genuine on-track ability as the Mercedes-AMG C63, it's still a car that's pretty easy to get a lot out of, although I wouldn't mess with it too much without the requisite skills. From a purist point of view, it could do with more feedback when you really start pushing it, but unless you're going to head out onto a racetrack every time you get behind the wheel, it is an immensely satisfying drive. The standard C63 already packs a potent 350 kilowatts, but the S version has its output cranked up to 375 kilowatts and 700 newton meters. The Mercedes-AMG C63S isn't a stripped-out hardcore racer. It's as well spec'd and as comfortable as the regular C-Class, but it's also incredibly quick, with handling talent that will outstrip most owners' abilities, although it lacks real feedback when pressing on.